What's your I tried to do a nice thing, but it ended in disaster story? Worked at an arcade prize counter. Summer camp of kids came rolling in. They had tickets for unlimited games but they couldn't get any points for the prize counter, which the counselors failed to tell the kids, so we had to keep explaining it. Some of the poor kids were super excited because they had won a jackpot. It was equal parts annoying and heartbreaking. Well, one kid showed up and was devastated. He'd been working all day to get enough points for this little clip-on fox plush. He was inconsolable. I decided to use my own points to get it for him, because I felt like that was a toy I would have liked as a little kid, and I'd also probably be equally devastated if I couldn't have it, and because I was well and truly annoyed with the counselors at that point, I told him to not tell anyone. He came back later in tears because the counselor confiscated the toy. To have the toy and have it taken away probably felt worse than not getting the toy at all. I felt awful. A squirrel was somehow stuck in my parents' fireplace while I was in college. My mom was home by herself and was freaking out. She tried her best to get it out but it kept climbing up the chimney every time she got close. I make it home on Friday afternoon after classes to help out. I find the squirrel curled up in the ashes in the fireplace. I grab it and put it outside, and since it was raining there were puddles all around. The squirrel took 2 steps into a puddle, had what looked like a seizure and died immediately. Ugh. Reminds me of one time I was babysitting and there was a bird stuck in the chimney. I was trying to get it out and finally succeeded. The bird flew out into the house and the little girl's dog immediately ate it. Like practically swallowed it whole. Me trying not to gag and a crying little girl. I stood up for an old woman on the bus and she spent the whole ride yelling at me because she is not old and does not require a seat. How dare I think that she can't stand by herself. Not sure if it counts as a disaster, but it was very uncomfortable. Most old people who I have seen in this situation just go something along the lines, no need you, I am fine, but thank you for the thought, and then stand. Yelling at people for doing that is just encouraging them not to be mindful of others in the future. Trying to catch and relocate a mouse. Didn't want to hurt it, but long story short, I dropped the stove on it. Gruesome. That's some wily coyote crap. Invited my elderly mom to live with us. She was widowed and had some emotional health problems. Short version, she got paranoid and started hating us for controlling her. She moved out, wrote me out of her will, and I never saw her again. After 15 months she died. That's sad. Sorry. Not as serious as some answers, but the other day at work I was supposed to put this box in a storage closet, but I didn't have a key, so I was just waiting for my boss to meet me. Another woman came up and asked me if I needed help. I said no, and she told me to get a key from the main office right down the hall. I went and asked for a key thinking if I could go ahead and get it done, that it might make things go smoother for my boss. Well, I tried to open the door and the key snapped in half, with half still stuck in the door. They couldn't get into the closet for about an hour and had to get special tools to get the key out of the door. So, I tried to be nice and get my work done early. Ended up breaking a door and making us stay an hour later. I was in a summer camp when I was 9, and after lunch, I decided to clean up everyone's trash for them. As I was throwing away the trash, a counselor saw me and yelled at me for throwing away his empty soda can. He told the other counselors and the adults running the camp that I did it with the intent of just throwing his food away. I cried so much on the car ride home. You were the sweetest 9-year-old ever, and that is an evil counselor. When I was a kid, I went into my mum's room and found our cat looking up at a small bird chilling on the rim of one of my mum's bags hanging from a cupboard only like a meter away. I had no idea how that bird got in the room. I panicked and went to try and shoo the bird out the window before my cat got to it. The bird didn't move when I got close, so I picked up the bag it was perched on and tipped it out of the window, at which point the poor bird dropped 2 stories onto the ground. I stared back, confused as to why it didn't fly off. It turns out it was injured and my mum had put it in the bag for it to heal or something and neglected to tell me. That bird's death will forever be on my conscience. I found a guy seizing out on the side of the road in a small town once. It looked like he fell and broke his glasses. He also had some blood running down the side of his head. So I called the ambulance for him because I didn't know what to do. The next day, a lady at one of my regular stops came up to me and said, "Why did you call so and so an ambulance yesterday? Now he has to pay for it. He's a tough guy and would have been fine. It happens all the time." It was midwinter and some random guy was twitching on the street. WTF was I supposed to do? Just keep driving? Just America things. I offered a mint to my boss. She got offended thinking I was saying she had bad breath and got really upset with me for like 3 weeks. The go-to move there is to pop one in your own mouth first, start to put the package away, then offer one to the other person like it's an afterthought and you are embarrassed because you almost forgot to share. On a rainy day, I gave a ride to a hitchhiker near campus that looked like a typical university student. I normally don't pick up hitchhikers, but it was hard to ignore him standing there in the pouring rain. I drove beyond where I was headed to get him to his stated destination, a place off the beaten path. But then he would not get out of the car. He just kept staring and telling me that he was lonely and needed someone to be with. I finally told him that we were headed to the police station if he didn't get out, and that did the trick. If it hadn't worked, we probably would have come to blows, because I could see he was building up to something. Oh god, this gave me the chills. I always think I would love to hitchhike pickup hikers, but this is exactly the kind of thing that makes me nope out. Was shoveling snow from my walkway, finished it and then did my neighbor's as he was old. Finished it and then decided to do the next one too. As I was finishing, my right foot slipped forward and I tried to keep from falling. I slid for about 8 feet trying to avoid going down. Blew out something in my knee and it hurt for the next 7 months. Not a disaster, but it sucked lol. I owned a riding mower that had a snowplow attachment. When it snowed, I got up early and plowed the walks on an entire block. Only one person ever thanked me. I once found a guy passed out in a puddle of his own vomit when I got off my train. After very responsibly catching not the last train, I shook him awake and found out that he wanted to be at the station before the one he was at. Took him to the other platform, got him some water and propped him up while he puked some more. Caught the train back with him, and when his car didn't let him beep out for some reason, convinced the station master that he was too drunk to cope and it could be dealt with in the morning. He let us both through without beeping out and I supported the guy while he attempted to find his apartment. We eventually found somewhere that let him in with his key, so it seemed a success and he stopped and looked at me and said, "I don't know you, do I? Thanks." So I went back to the station, planning to sort out my card, then just walk home. But the station master recognized me and said I was in time for the last train, so I ran like the wind and caught the wrong freaking train, express to the next city. That was a really cool thing you did for that guy. I have given homeless people money and then had them follow me, berating me for not giving them enough. Really scary and frustrating. So I quit giving people on the street money. Now I just feel badly saying no, but I blend in with everyone else who says no. I've been threatened and called names for attempting to give a begging homeless person some food. I loaned my sister $6,000 because she, according to her, was laid off and needed the money to pay back a $401k loan. The plan was to pay me back within weeks once her $401k was released to her. I always had a great relationship with this sister and I trusted her. Well, all of that was lies. Come to find out, she used my money to pay off a drug dealer and then she and her girlfriend went on a year-long HC binge until they both lost their houses and their cars. I'm glad to know that my hard-earned money was basically used for partying. In case anyone needs to ask, I have cut her out of my life and never plan to speak to her again. I'm like 96% certain that this is grand embezzlement and therefore a serious crime. I think the statute of limitations on embezzlement is about 2-3 years, so you might be out of luck. I saw a little Pomeranian aimlessly walking around a busy road once. I pulled over and got him to come to me. He was scared and confused. I didn't know what to do with him. It was a business district, no houses around, so I took him to the closest vet to see if he was chipped. The vet said the dog wasn't and was severely dehydrated and needed to be kept overnight for observation. Okay, poor thing. But who's going to pay for it? Ugh. Okay, I'll be responsible until the owner is found. The next day the vet calls and says I can pick up the dog. Turns out it's half blind. deaf and super old. The vet gave me instructions on how to care for it. We're still looking for the owner. The next day the vet called and said the dog needed to come back in for a follow-up. Okay, I bring it in. It's a snuggle bug who warmed up to me and my roommates. Old and crickety but sweet. I bring it in and the vet says they'll call when the follow-up is done. Maybe a couple hours. The vet calls back 2 hours later. They said the owner claimed the dog yesterday but couldn't get in to collect the dog until today, and when they came to pick it up decided to just put the dog down. Wait, can I just take the dog and help it live out the rest of its short life with some love? Nope, not my dog. But they tell me there's still the matter of the bill for the overnight observation. How did I want to pay for that? Seriously. So I was trying to help my friend because they spilled their milk and I was wiping it up. I lifted up the milk container to clean under it and accidentally dumped the rest of it on their pants. I felt so bad. No use crying over spilled milk. About a year ago, I was going out with this girl who was extremely self-conscious and sensitive. She would often ask me questions such as, am I fat or would you love me if I was heavy? To these I would answer yes and move on because I found her questions strange, considering she was quite skinny. But one day, she asked me one of these questions and it all went terribly wrong. The conversation went something like this. However, it's mostly paraphrased as I don't remember everything that was said. Would you still treat me the same if I were to gain weight? I'm quite fat and you still hug me. Me. Even if you were there'd be more of you anyway, so it wouldn't even be that bad, right? After this she basically snapped. She said something along the lines of, I can't believe you'd say that to me. I thought you loved me, you're a terrible person. I can't believe I fell in love with you. After her small breakdown she pushed me and ran off. I never understood why I got so upset. I just wanted to make her feel better considering she never liked it when I told her that she wasn't actually fat. Honey, you're beautiful and I love you. Repeat while backing away slowly and keeping your eyes on her. Flee and never return. It's not really a disaster, but I used to work security and part of that job was telling people they can't go wherever it is they are trying to go. There was a dog show and the showrunners were adamant that not a single motor vehicle passed through my gate. Period. It is for foot traffic only. No exceptions. Well, as I'm turning people away, this old lady rides up on a little scooter. There is not handicap tag on it and she looks physically healthy, but I just assumed she was handicapped anyway and let her pass without issue. So she spends all day coming and going. The next day she's up early coming and going. Later that morning she comes riding up with her arm twisted behind her, dragging this huge box on wheels that is packed with a bunch of equipment. The wheels on this thing are like the wheels on a grocery cart, the spinning kind that aren't worth a dang. This box is tugging her arm all over the place and it's bigger than she is. So as she drives by I ask her if she'd like some help. She doesn't even stop, but as she rides by she says, no, I need you to get the frick out of my way. Thanks, and just keeps going. So I'm standing there kinda stunned at her response because I did not expect that at all. But alright. No motor vehicles. Period. Remember? So she comes rolling back up later that day and I close the gate on her and I give her the same little speech about the rules that I give everyone else. She freaking went nuts and it turns out she's not handicapped because she jumped out of that scooter and tried to force the gate open. She runs to the showrunners and they come to talk to me and I tell them what happened, and unlike my spineless boss at the time, they actually had my back. But she spent the rest of the week glaring at me and she tried cursing at me, but I reminded her that if she kept that up she wouldn't be allowed to compete in the show. So it worked out, but that was a memorable time when I tried doing my job and just be a decent human and it backfired. Dog show people can be crazy. Source: I used to show dogs. I sent flowers anonymously to a woman I used to babysit for, with just her Bible verse on the card. She was a single mom. I knew she had been through a lot to restart her life, and I guess I was just in the mood to offer a random act of encouragement. I was 18 at the time. I got a call from the flower company when they arrived. The woman was freaking out and wanted to know who the sender was. I refused to release that information because I didn't want to make it about me. In the years since, I have pieced together what the incident must have seemed like from her perspective. Her ex was abusive and she fought hard to get away from him. She must have thought that he had located her and was beginning to stalk her. Who knew flowers could come off so sinister? But I understand these things much better now and I am so ashamed. I made up an Easter basket once for a friend of my boyfriend that lamented that as an adult she never got one anymore. I left it on her porch with a funny note, but I guess overnight an animal got into it and ripped it all apart. She did what any of us would have done in that situation, called the cops and made a report that someone had sent her a death threat. I was walking outside when I saw a woman struggling to push a lady in a wheelchair from the street onto the sidewalk. I've worked in many nursing homes, pushing chairs, so I offered to help. She couldn't get her up the little ramp built into the sidewalk. The lady was pretty big, so assumed this was why. I rolled her back a little and pushed her as hard as I could to get some momentum. Turns out there was a concrete lip about 0.5 inch, which is why the chair wasn't going onto the ramp originally. The front wheels get stuck on this lip with all the momentum behind my push caused the wheelchair's 2 back wheels come up, essential throwing the lady out. Thank God her caretaker had quick reflexes catching her so she didn't fall out. A third person came to help and we had to pick up the chair, but I was horrified. I almost threw out a disabled woman from her wheelchair onto the curb. If you should find yourself in this position again, push down hard on the wheelchair handles, effectively popping a wheelie with the tiny front wheels to clear the obstruction. Maybe not a disastrous end, but when I was traveling Thailand I was on one of the party islands and saw a group of 4 guys dragging their friend across the floor who was covered in vomit and was also having the back of his head dragged across concrete. I stopped and asked if he was okay, to which they said he was fine. I honestly could not tell if he was breathing and asked if I could check on him. His mates said he was fine. Told them I was a nurse and I could check him over and maybe they should stop dragging his head across the floor because it was actually bleeding. One of them shoved me and said, "So what? You're a nurse? You think you're better than me?" At that point just had to walk away, as it looked as though if I tried to help they would just kick off and I was on my own. Then went to find my friends. I assume he was fine as I didn't hear of anyone dying and they were gone when I went past the same area later. It was honestly just such a bizarre reaction and they seemed to have no clue that he might actually be in trouble. Sounds like those might not have actually been his friends, and that he was very not fine, and that they didn't want you looking at him, or that those were his friends, and he was very not fine. I saw a spider in my house. Went to get a cup and index card to set him outside as I always do. Sucker didn't want to go in the cup and I ended up stepping on him by accident. I was trying, dude. My wife had a knee-jerk reaction after a spider came out of nowhere in the bathroom, panicked in front of my 2-year-old, and now my 3-year-old is still terrified of bugs. Like any bug. Said, "Madam, you will have to wait." Lady yelled at me for 30 minutes because she's not old. Really? I was being respectful. And if you call an older lady miss, you might get yelled at cause she's not a child. A homeless guy by my house was asking for money for food outside a restaurant, so I offered to buy him dinner. Turns out I forgot my wallet at home, so I told him I'd still pay if he waited like 10 minutes for me to go home and grab it. I got back in 7 and he was gone and I had to pay for 2 meals because I had already made the food. Leftovers. My wife had a co-worker who was young and had addiction issues. I forked over a few grand to help him get into an excellent rehab program instead of paying off our wedding, putting a lot of financial stress on us. Before the rehab place had an opening for him, I walked in on him with my wife. They moved in together and have 2 kids now. On the bright side, you are probably better off while she lives with an addict. I was once on a flight and drank a cup of coffee. When done, I couldn't find a place to put the cup. I don't remember why the tray table was not an option. I eventually conceded and just held onto the cup. An older gentleman next to me tapped my arm and happily took my cup. A few minutes later, the remnants of my coffee spilled on his dress white shirt. I have felt bad ever since. But I learned a life lesson. If you help people, then sometimes things will go wrong for you. That is simply a price that we pay to be nice, and you should not let it dissuade you from helping nor get angry when it happens. With that in mind, I once helped some hotel staff move some tables and sprained my wrist in the process. No worries guys, it happens. Not quite a disaster in the end, but they tried. Reconnected with an old school friend, found out they had extremely severe mental problems. Tried to be their friend and support them. They started abusing me and attacking the girl I was in a relationship with. cut them completely off just to have them contact my girlfriend and basically tell her I did a heap of crap I didn't. Luckily I'd already told her about this person and so she knew they weren't telling the truth. Some people require professional help and you getting involved doesn't achieve anything. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.